you wanted the best, you've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. This is Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. There and ladies sings that makes it official. Welcome to the big show. We certainly appreciate you guys coming by. As always, we have the most amazing minds that come on the show, and we recommend that you refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss 1 on the tickety-tockety, and all those crazy places around on the internet. Today we have an amazing author on the show. He's the author of the latest book that's come out February 12th, 2024. It's called The Gambler's Game, based on the true story of the man who broke the bank at Monte Carlo. And the stuff that goes into this is going to be very interesting, and some of the twists and turns of the tale from a family story, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll get into it here in a second as we have the author on the show. James Darnborough joins us on the show with us today, and he grew up in London, has lived in and worked in the media business in South Africa, Australia, London, and New York. He currently lives in Los Angeles, California, and his investigations for his book, The Gambler's Game, have taken him to Colorado, Illinois, Mexico City, London, and Monaco, where he met with the Casino di Monte Carlo directors. Welcome to the show, James. How are you?
Good morning, Chris. I'm very well, and it's a great pleasure to be here.
A great pleasure to have you as well. Give us your .coms. Where do you want people to see you on the interwebs?
The easiest is the website, which is thegamblersgame.com. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, we're very active on Instagram and Facebook and everything else. Just look for The Gambler's Game.
There you go. So give us a 30,000 overview. What's inside your book?
This is the story of the only American to break the bank playing roulette in Monte Carlo at 1910. And the story follows him from small town Illinois. He was born on a farm near a little town called Lebanon in southern Illinois. And he was a pitcher, baseball pitcher, incredibly talented and very, very fast. And he played in the Midwestern League against these amazing teams with incredible names like Minneapolis Millers and the Omaha Hogs and all these things.
Wow.
And all the time he was learning how to play roulette. And so the story is written in the present tense, and we follow him as he becomes better and better and better. And eventually he ends up in Monte Carlo, where he lived for 8 years.
There you go. And evidently broke the bank as well. So there you go. So now there's some origins to this story. It's a historical fiction book. Tell us about some of the origin of the characters in this book.
Well, what's interesting is that it is very much like a lot of fictional tales. Like, for example, the Russian writer Dostoevsky wrote a story called The Gambler in 1860 something, I believe. And it's extraordinary because this is remarkably like that. It's about a guy who's nobody special. He's just from a small town, and he seeks fame and fortune. And then, of course, it's all about, does he get the girl? Does he not get the girl? And there's all these twists and turns and adventures and everything else. So you've got to remember that this is a time when, you know, the frontier in terms of anything beyond the Rockies was still pretty untamed. Gambling was everywhere, and the saloons was where it was at. But it was a pretty risky and certainly, you know, unpredictable life. Full of treachery, and, you know, who do you trust? And the answer is nobody, except yourself.
Change much.
And so that's right. So that's the story. What was fun for me was finding out, you know, I mean, in the book I've got all the baseball teams, and I thanks to the internet, I know all their names, where they were from, how much they weighed, how tall they were, how magnificent their moustaches were. And so what I wanted to do was to give them an opportunity to talk to each other so we could see what they were really like. And that's the experience. Yeah.
There's some family members in this book as well. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, he is my grandfather. Mm-hmm. So I know I'm English. However, that is because he eventually emigrated from the States to Monaco and then to the United Kingdom, where he spent the remainder of his days. And in fact, he's buried in a little village in the Chiltern Hills between Oxford and London, in our little village where we still live. And so it's just him. I mean, that's the thing, is that he really escaped from the little town, because the baseball players were like the movie stars of today. They were really, really famous. The newspapers, that baseball was it. That was it. There was
America's
nothing else.
pastime.
Exactly. And there was nothing else. There was no American football. There was no radio. There was no TV. There was no cinema. Nothing. So the newspapers really reported every single game ball by ball. And so the guys, especially the pitchers, they were famous. And he wanted that. He wanted to travel. And being part of a baseball team is the best way to travel, unless you're, like a snake oil salesman in the Old West. So that's what he did. And the trains were amazing. The trains in those days, the trains were like a spider's web of railroads across the whole of North America. And so he took full advantage of that. And then he started playing roulette and kept on traveling.
So now, was this a story that had been kind of passed through your family and stuff, and you became aware of it? How did you come across the story and decide that this is something you wanted to tell the story on?
Well, like any family, if we have legends and myths and stories that have, I'm sure, exaggerated themselves through each generation, like everybody. It's like when you search on ancestry.com, you look for the heroes and villains, don't you? And it's a case of making sure that you can verify the facts. And thanks to the millions and millions of people around the world who scan in newspaper archives. So I've got newspaper clippings going back to the 1880s from tiny little towns in Colorado, and also the New York Times and the London Times and the San Francisco Chronicle. I mean, a lot of these papers that still exist, but a lot don't. But you can find them, and incredibly easily now. You remember we used to have to go to libraries and go through microfiches?
Oh, yeah, I remember those days.
Right? I know. Now you can just open up your laptop. And so that's amazing. Now, I don't trust all journalists. I mean, especially in the 1890s and 1900. So it's good to get a few facts and then, try and build on that. Because I wanted it to be as true to the actual real life events as possible. So all the people are real. I mean, 95% of the characters in this story are real people. And I thought that was very, very important to make it as real as possible.
And I mean, there's some overlap of the Downton Abbey show in your family and also the characters in the book. Tell us a lot about that, how that played out.
Yeah, I can't really explain how this happened, but Downton Abbey, A New Era, is the latest film. And in it, in case you haven't seen it, there is a film crew who arrive at Downton Abbey to make a film. And it's a silent film. I mean, this is like 1920 or something. And Downton Abbey agreed to do it because they'll get the money to pay for the roof. And it's really quite a lovely little story. Anyway, the film within the film is called The Gambler. And it's about this woman who is trying to stop the main character playing roulette. Because she's in love with him, but she doesn't want to marry a gambler. Anyway, so that her name is Miss Erskine, which is my grandmother's name, and his name is Bill, which is my grandfather's name. So basically, Julian Fellows, who created the story, I checked this because I actually hadn't seen the film when I heard about it. So now I've got the script because I wanted to check everything. And my editor in LA is a longtime family friend of the Fellows family, and he said this is quite normal. Julian Fellows takes real people from real life, from history, and then changes the characters a little bit. But he wasn't in the least bit surprised. And because I mean, it's because in those days, I mean, this guy, Bill Darnborough, was incredibly famous. And, they still write about him now in dark gambling corners of the internet. They're still trying to work out how he did it.
Wow. This is a pretty amazing story, and you got quite the overlap there, the famous films and all that good stuff. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Is this your first book? What got you wanting to write? I think you do a few other trades like acting and et cetera, et cetera. Tell us about how you grew up and what it was like and got you down the field and roads you are today.
Yeah, I wanted to be an actor, but my father was a film producer and he dissuaded me and everyone around me. A life of poverty and disappointment is really not what this is all about. And that just happened. So I got into the media business, and I was a magazine publisher. And I published my first magazine I left England, went to South Africa. I was really young, 19. And I published my first magazine was a PGA golf magazine in South Africa. And because they didn't have one. So I made one for them. And it sort of went from there. And I did one for the Rugby World Cup in South Africa, which is the one where Mandela handed the World Cup trophy to Francois Pienaar, the captain of South African rugby team. And that was extraordinary. Oh, wow. Because, I was right there, front row seat, because I'd done the official magazine. And this was a moment that changed the world. When Mandela was released from prison and became president, that was wonderful. But honestly, this rugby match changed not only South Africa, and we had no idea what a big deal it was. I think there were 40 or 50,000 of us in the stadium in Johannesburg. I didn't know that 2 billion people were watching it on TV, apparently. And I didn't even know there were 2 billion televisions in the world then. It was in 95. There you go. But I carried on doing magazines. I moved to Australia, in South Africa in my 20s, Australia in my 30s. Then I came to California because, London is wonderful. It was great to grow up there, and I love visiting. I go all the time. I've just come back from 7 weeks in London. But, it's like a lot of big cities. Visiting and living and working there are two completely different things. So I'm very, very lucky to be now in Southern California. I've been here for 10 years. And
there you go.
I love it. It's raining, really, really raining today. Amazingly.
Yeah. One of my friends sent me a video, and it just looks like a hell of a storm again. Yeah. Crazy what's going on with the weather there. It's getting a little hard if you're a climate change denier to deny it anymore. I was kind of skeptical, but now it's crazy what's going on. But I don't know. I guess I better quit burning my fossil fuels in the backyard all the time. So you're an actor. I noticed you do some artist work too on your website here.
Yeah, I did. We all did weird things in lockdown, and I'm no exception. It was either learn Mandarin or, sit around watching box sets of whatever on Netflix. I just happened to see a guy on YouTube doing pendulum painting, and he just had this amazing contraption. He hung it from the ceiling. So I cleared out the garage and you'd find me 3 days later, and there's more paint on me than on the actual canvas. I did giant canvases on the floor of the garage, and then had this, pendulum paint flow going and doing these amazing cylindrical patterns, just basically using gravity. And it just got bigger and bigger, and I kept doing it. And now you can get them on, phone cases and bags and I don't know, even yoga mats apparently, but people buy the prints occasionally. But it's just one of those nice creative things to do.
Yeah, there you go.
You feel like you've made something from scratch that's going to outlive you. Yeah, I like that.
I like the Quicksilver one. That's really cool looking. And then the multi-people mover quadrophenia ones. Those are really cool to look at. They're just interesting. They seem simple in the format, but then you're like, no, it's really. You get in there. Anyway, I might be looking at it too hard here. So you do all these different things. So you when did you start writing the book for this?
This was a complete accident. So there was a guy in England was writing a book about US air bases in England during the Second World War. And my father had made a movie using one of these bases back in the 50s. And so this guy was researching. He got in touch with me. My father passed away a long time ago. Got in touch with me and said, can you give me any more information? And we exchanged a few emails. And then in a very English sort of way, one email arrived and he goes, I hope you don't mind, I Googled you. and on the desk. He's been in England too long.
Yeah.
And he said, "You're the grandson of Bill Darnborough, the man who broke the Bank of Monte Carlo, the baseball player. And so you're in LA, and he said, you're in the property business, so you must know all the film guys in LA." And I'm thinking, sure, I've got Chris Nolan on speed dial. I don't know anybody in the film business. But he said, why don't you write a screenplay? It'll be a blockbuster. It's got everything. It's got all the ingredients. HBO will snap it up.
Yeah.
I thought, okay. I've never written a screenplay. And actually, my wife said, when I pronounced this is what I was going to do, she said, no, you don't get away with it this easily. This is kind of what you've been waiting for. It's the push that you need to actually write the whole book.
Yeah.
And so I started doing, 4 hours a night. I was working during the day and I was doing 4 hours a night. And then suddenly it became 2, 3 in the morning. And then it just took over my whole world. And I spent the next 3 years putting it together and refining it and editing it. And here we are. Today.
Launching the book. And I think what's really cool about this story is that, it's based in fact, it's based in something that happened. Now, when you say break the bank, can you tell us what the actual breaking the bank means specifically?
It's not what you'd expect. It's actually a very clever marketing ploy that Francois Blanc came up with. And he's the guy that started the Casino de Monte Carlo in the 1860s. And what happens is, if you're playing roulette and you deplete all the funds of the table, you win all the funds, all the chips that they've got in reserve, you win all of it. Then the chef de partie, who is like a pit boss, right, in casinos in the States, he has to signal for more money to come to be brought to the table so play can continue. So in those days, it was about 70,000 francs. It's quite a lot. Anyway, so if you then win all of that as well, then it is called breaking the bank. And they had this amazing ceremony where they would come out from the director's office with this black cloth, and it was sort of like some kind of a funeral or something. And they would drape this black cloth over the entire grid and the wheel of the roulette table and say the table is closed and the bank has been broken. And so people from all over would come and see what's going on, because this is a big, big spectacle. And of course, the newspapers would write about it, which meant publicity for the casino.
Smart.
And it's just, a lot of lotteries use this line, "It could be you." And that's exactly, Francois Blanc was a genius and things like this. He also, I don't know if have you ever been to Monte Carlo?
I haven't.
Have you seen pictures of the cars outside the casino?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. He did this. Yeah. So in 1911, they had the very first rally in Monte Carlo, and this was the precursor to the Formula One, which we all know now. And he was the first person in the world to put tarmac outside on the ground. And so above the asphalt, he had tarmac, and he said, right, all the cars at the end of the rally park out, the winners at least, park outside the casino steps. And that's how that tradition started. So again, you look at these cars, you look at these Ferraris and Lamborghinis and Aston Martin, you think, I might go in this room because I might be able to win that car.
Yeah.
So, marketing genius.
Park the nice cars up front. Yeah. And the allure of the story, it's, James Bond was always seemed to be in Monte Carlo sometimes. There's always that allure of that whole thing. I love the boats that go into Monte Carlo. You see the boats. Oh my God. It's crazy. And it seems pretty small too. That's what's
I know. It's actually, it's a tiny place. It's the biggest Central Park.
Yeah.
And
really,
and it's all because of the casino that it came. Two things happened: the casino was built, and then a railway was built from Nice. And that's how there were no roads. They're kind of old rutted roads that are left over from Roman chariots, but the railway, just like in the States, everywhere in the world, really, the railway changed everything. So no one in Monaco is allowed to gamble in the casino.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So everyone had to come from France. So they come across the border, not far, from Nice or Italy, from the other side of Menton, from Milan and places. And but otherwise, if you're JP Morgan, you would come on your yacht. So he had a yacht, a steam yacht with 2 funnels, and it was called the Corsair. And he used to go there a lot, but it was Russian dukes and, French counts and Italian contessas and British lords and ladies. I mean, it was an incredible time. But the casino itself hasn't changed much. It's still got these amazing chandeliers. It's still very quiet. You have to dress well and all that. So it's
they won't let me in, that's for sure.
Of course they will, Chris. Of course they will. You've got a suit somewhere.
There's a suit somewhere, but I'd be trying to show up in flip flops and shorts. They'd throw me out of my ear, I'm sure. And then they'd be like, "Hey, where's the 50-cent betting table? 50-cent betting table?" That's funny that they do that whole drama thing with the draping over the roulette wheel, and the whole. The bank has been broken, here in Vegas, when you do that well at a table, they just give you, 2 tickets to Britney Spears and, a cheap steakhouse, and they comp you for the night.
Right. Or they take you around the back and ask you what's going on.
Yeah. We've all seen that scene in Casino from the thing with the hammer. Yeah. There's a lot of that goes on sometimes in Vegas. It doesn't end well. I've known people that have ended up in the black book. I'm like, really? Seriously? You can't go into a casino? Fuck. What did you do wrong? Who hurt you? Or who'd you hurt? But yeah, it's a funny town. It's funny when you win a lot in Vegas now, they kick you out too. They don't like people who win that are really good at winning. It's kind of weird. I think it's the only place where they can ban you for winning too much. And you're like, what the hell? So there you go. So people have to read the novel to find out more, the historical fiction novel, and what's inside of it. I think it's cool that it has your family in it as well, and so it's a personal story. This would make a great screenplay, though.
I agree, and I'm really hoping that HBO or Netflix or somebody picks it up. It should be an 8 or 10 part. But what's extraordinary is the amount of things that we found. So my grandmother, I should say, was very fastidious about keeping things very well organized, and she kept everything. She's got a royal enclosure badge from Ascot, Ascot race meeting from 1909, and we've still got it. And I've got letters, loads and loads of letters from people. I'll give you one quick example. There was the guy who invented the machine gun. His name's Hiram Maxim. And he was an engineer, obviously, but he was fascinated with roulette because he was trying to work out statistical probability. And, how basically, like everybody, he wants to know, how do you win? And he wrote this book, which I've got. He wrote a book in 1904 called Monte Carlo Facts and Fallacies. And it's unbelievably complicated, how he's got pages and pages and pages of mathematical calculations, just goes on forever and ever and ever. Anyway, I've got a letter that he wrote to my grandfather. And so he'd been watching him, or he'd paid someone to watch him, and he knew exactly the how much he'd won, how much he'd lost, and what he'd been betting on. And right at the end of the letter, he says, "But please, will you share with me some more details, some further information about your system?" Yours faithfully, Sir Hiram Maxim. Now, I don't know if my grandfather answered that letter, but if I was him, I wouldn't have. And this is the question I get asked a lot these days is, how did he do it? Yeah. And I have a fair idea. It's a lot of patience and more patience. But if I knew for sure what his system was, then Chris, I would have invited you down to my super yacht in Monaco Harbor, where we'd be having this chat. And
I would have taken that invite. I've seen. I don't gamble a lot. The only gambling I do is with business and being an entrepreneur. But I've done a little bit of gambling in Vegas when I first moved down there for the first month or two. I was like, let's play. And I remember one time I was in the old Desert Inn before Wynn bought it and tore it all down and put up his stupid hotels. Stupid, or whatever. But when he wasn't poking holes with pens in famous art, I shouldn't make fun of a guy with one bad eye, because I have it too. So maybe that's why it's funny. But I was at the old Desert Inn, and I went in there. I was there with the night. I think I had a girlfriend or something. Yeah. We were there visiting for a weekend or something. And so I was up late, and I was at the blackjack table. And I can't gamble worth a shit, but blackjack, I you can kind of win a little bit here and there. And I was playing, and this guy comes on the table, and he just starts running. He looks like some kid who, I don't know, drove in on a motorcycle, and he just starts gambling in a way I'd never seen and never seen since. And he's going all in on a hand, and you're like, that doesn't look like that's that good of a hand. And then sometimes he's just a $5 bet, no fold out. And then every time he goes in hard, he wins like heavy, right? And then you'll see him pull back and go light, and then he'll lose. And he just kept running this thing. It was like, $500 bet this round, $5 bet, $10 bet the next round. It was insane, the system. And I to this day, I have no idea what he was doing, but it got so bad that he was winning so much just within a very short time period. They tried changing they changed the dealers on us, and then they brought in another dealer, and he started mocking the dealer, and it was like extraordinary. What he started mocking it, started talking shit to the dealer, and I'm just like, can we all just get along? And it got to the point the pit boss came over and was trying to get him off the table, and he's like, hey, you're running a pretty strong game here. You want to, we can comp you. And this guy was balls out something, and he's trying to offer him all these comps and dinner. He's like, hey, if you want to take a break, we'll comp you a few nights of this. We'd love to have you stay. And what are you doing? And the guy's just like, fuck off, eh? He's just like cold as ice, right? And so the pit boss goes, what do you want so we can have you stay at the hotel and you can play for a few days? And he goes, that motorcycle that's in the front lobby, and how sometimes they have like a car or something in the lobby?
Right.
He goes, I want that. And then I'll get off the table. And the boss goes, no, we can't do that. That thing's, expensive. He goes, I'm going to keep running your table. Just an asshole to everybody, except for those players. And I'd never seen it before in my life. And last time I left, he was just running that table, man. He had a pile of chips like a mile long when he got done. So it was just extraordinary to watch the intrigue of it.
Yeah. They should have given him the motorbike.
I think that was what they should have done at the end. But he was mocking the dealer. You're an idiot. Oh, you're going to change the dealers on me. I see what you're doing. I'm just like, holy shit, man. I think the Desert Inn might still be run by the mob. I don't know, but it's the 90s. I think back then El Rancho, or I think there was only one or two that were still mob run back then. But still, you don't want to go pushing your way around Vegas. There's all sorts of seedy characters, including me there. So,
so imagine what it was like in the old saloons. So imagine if you're, in a place like in Nevada, there's a silver town called Eureka, and they had, I think it was called the Gem Saloon at one point. And so what my grandfather would do is he would turn up at these saloons with his own roulette wheel. So he had his own roulette wheel and a little fold-up felt grid for the numbers, and he would show up. And so they've already got a license because they're playing cards in there. Okay, so they doesn't have to worry. He's not breaking any laws. And he goes straight up to the saloon owner and says, "Let's have a roulette game going in your saloon, and you get a cut, and it'll cost you nothing." Because he's got his own chips, so he's his own house, and that's what he did for years and years and years. He toured around the saloons. Now, if you think Vegas is dangerous and you've got to watch your language and how what kind of respect you show to the dealers. Imagine what it was like in those days when they really would take you back, right out the back and shoot you, and there'd been zero repercussions. Because basically, there was a point where civility stopped at Denver. Anything beyond Denver, you're on your own.
You're on your own. There you go. That'll do it. So any final tease outs you can tell us that's inside of the book?
I think that it's really designed for anybody that wants to go on a truly remarkable adventure. And I think that this is such an extraordinary story that if it wasn't actually true, you wouldn't believe it.
Yeah.
There's, you asked me about the family rumors and legends. There was one, which is that Bill went across the Andes with mules with bags full of gold. And I just I found a letter that someone had written to the New York Times about him being in Bolivia and Chile and Peru, but nothing further. And so it's not in the book. So my point is that I want you to understand that this all really happened. There's 190 characters in this book,
wow.
and 90% of them are real people. So like all the guys and the horses and the saloons, like Eugene Madden ran a saloon in Denver called Madden's, Irishman, and he had a barman called Michael Flaherty. And this is in 1888. I've got Michael Flaherty's photograph. And so that's the lengths that I went to make this as absolutely true to the facts. And it is an extraordinary story, and I agree it'll make a great screenplay. But when you go to, I don't know about you, but when you go to see a film and the first line you see on the black screen is based on a true story, I'm hooked.
Yeah, that makes it definitely more interesting. Yeah, because you're like, this really happened. Let's find out what's up. So there you go. Well, it's been fun to have you on. People will get a great romp through on the book. I think it's cool, the tie-ins with Downton Abbey and certainly the historical nature of the history of your family. And everyone loves the good gambling, beating the bank, and anybody who can pull that off story. So thank you very much for coming on, James. Give us your .coms one more time as we go out.
Right. So thegamblersgame.com, and the Instagram is, if you search for The Gambler's Game, you'll get it, but it's actually Bill_Darnborough, DARNBOROUGH. But if you look for The Gambler's Game, you'll find Dostoevsky's book from the 1860s, and one other, and then mine more recently. And of course, you can buy the audiobook on Amazon and Kindle, and the paperback version. The audio guy is fantastic because it's American narration, it's an American character, but he also had to do Russian accents and German and French and Italian and Mexican Spanish and Scottish and an English lady. And we found this amazing guy. His name's Kevin Clay, and he recorded it in Arkansas.
Oh, wow.
And I know. It was amazing. We use people from all over the world from this. But Kevin in Arkansas is the only American I know that can actually talk in different accents. So you've got two people talking to each other. One is Russian, one is German. And he can pull that off. And not many people can do that. And I'm very, very pleased that we managed to find him to do the audio.
Fun for Audible book readers. So thank you very much, James, for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris. It's been a real pleasure. And I love you. I love your podcast. It's great.
There you go. Thank you. I love it too. It's a good podcast. I'm going to keep it. 15 years, I'm going to keep it. So thank you very much for coming on the show, James. Thanks to our audience for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss 1 on the TikTokity, and Chris Voss Facebook.com. We're everywhere, people. Just look for us. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe, and we'll see you guys next time.